Newsline with Faraz Shaukat Ali on TV1.
And a very good evening to you and a warm welcome to Newsline. And once again, I'm based here out in London, and my guest is in our studios in downtown Colombo, in Dawson Street, Mr. Rehan Jayawickreme, who is a up-and-coming politician, the former head of the local council in Welligama, and he's right here in the studio with us. Very good evening to you, Rehan.
Good evening, Faraz.
Thank you very much. So, Rehan, just for the record, you're still with the SJB, are you?
Yes. Last time I checked, I wasn't a frog.
So, talking politics, we've just had the IMF team in Sri Lanka, and they've made some various sort of very diplomatic statements. But Rehan, what is your take? What is the take of your party in terms of Sri Lanka's recovery from this economic mess that was put forward by the former president, Gotabaya Rajapaksa's policies?
I think that when this IMF agreement was actually being put forward, the conditions, the taxation systems, and none of it was presented to Parliament. And the reason being that the Minister of Finance, Ranjit Siyambalapitia, said that that there could be sensitive information that could harm the country. So that being said, we have the leader of the SJB, Mr. Sajith Premadasa, Professor Harsha De Silva, and other members of the SJB, and also members of the opposition in general, met with the visiting IMF team, and what was clearly reiterated to them was that in the event of SJB government coming into power, we are not really talking about scrapping the IMF, but that we need to revise certain conditions so that it doesn't burden the general public of this country. And that was the last meeting, I think, that was held a few days ago. Then we also heard news today that even though the IMF official statement showed some signs of positivity, it also highlighted a vast number of negative points that we need to get back on track if we are supposed to get the second reimbursement of the $330 million.
We also noticed that at an international forum, the United Nations human rights people, in their statement, they also urged, not only did they urge the government to return to get on with accountability and reconciliation and investigations over there, but they also asked for the investigation of the East tragedy, but also noticeably they said that the money that is being given by the IMF in part of their arrangement with Sri Lanka should make sure that the government has policies that will not further burden the people and impinge on their economic and social rights. Does your party have a line on that?
We are completely against some of the bills that the government hopes to introduce. I think it's two very vital bills on the order paper in Parliament for the 3rd of October. One of those is the Anti-Terrorism Act, which is basically a revamped, I wouldn't really call it a solution, but it's going to cause further problems. So that act is going to be tabled in Parliament on the 3rd. And also the online safety bill, which is also curbed at stifling dissent of over 20 million Sri Lankans in their right to free speech, where Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and all these social media platforms, the government will have a direct hand at regulating. So when you say stability, my question is it going to be stability over democracy? Because both pillars have to work hand in hand in order for the international community to take us seriously, and I don't see that happening. So the IMF for us is only one line of the solution, but there are also there's also heavy pressure from the EU, from various missions, from various countries, that we need to really focus on these human rights. Because right now, we as a party don't see human rights being a pillar that this government is really interested in. They are more interested in focusing on stability, but like I said, is it going to be stability over democracy?
But honestly, how do you expect the people to be stable and pliant with government regulations and so on when their economic rights have been so severely impacted?
Now, when you look at the statistics where they say that inflation has come down, yes, in numbers it has come down, but has it affected people's day-to-day lives? Yes, not in a positive way, in a negative way. If you go to a supermarket, if you go to your polar, if you go to any place where you buy food items, nothing has really come down. The prices of goods are still very much the same. So the numbers game, yes, what we are presented is looking very fruitful and cozy, but again, what's the point if people are not going to benefit from this? And there it comes into question the government's mandate. This all boils down to a mandate. Because this government is mandateless, people said go home. People didn't say go home, Ranil come in and let's form the government with the same bunch of people that ruined this country in the first place. And we see that happening. It's evident in the president's trip to the UN. It's evident in the way the Pohottuwa is still commanding some sort of influence over the president. And these are the very reasons why we requested for elections. And this was one of the very reasons that we set conditions that even if we did take the government and even if the opposition candidate Dallas Alahaperuma did become the president of the country, that after the initial stages of the IMF or the first meeting that we have to go in for election. So like I said, it's a mandateless government, it's a mandateless president. And overall, it's a mandateless circus that's going on at the moment.
What of this contingent that went along with President Wickremesinghe to the United Nations? It had. Do you think the makeup of that team that accompanied the president was necessary, and did it serve the purpose? And what was the purpose?
Now, for us, look at the members who went on the delegation. Now, there are multiple things that went wrong with this particular trip. One is the people that the president took. We had Rohit Habegunawardena, we had Mahindananda Alutgamage. I don't know the other members of the Pohottuwa who went, but we also had non-parliamentarian Rehan Jayawickreme. But in his defense, he could always say that he's the climate change advisor of the president. We had multiple people going with him, and for what? And the most horrifying thing about this whole thing was that the foreign minister of the country took his son, who's 21 years old, to the United Nations General Assembly sideline meetings. And I was one of the first people to actually bring this up on Twitter. And I asked Minister Ali Sabri the reasoning behind taking his son. I wasn't sure whether it was taxpayer funded or not. He didn't really reply to me directly, but his reply was worse than the initial action, because the very next day he posted a Twitter message saying that his son was employed as a research assistant who didn't get paid, and that the foreign ministry, he had so many X amount of meetings, and to help him help him out with the work, that his son, accompanied him. And for me, that's a complete breach of protocol. It's a complete breach of basic ethics, morals. And this is a man who in parliament speaks as if he's addressing a courtroom and speaks about the morality and the ethics of other politicians. But what about him? What about the fact that, he could have apologized? We're all human. We all make mistakes. He's an accomplished lawyer. I'm not taking that away from him. I have nothing personal against him. But when the country's reputation is at stake, we brought it up, and the answer he gave was, oh, look, I took my son as a research assistant. But my question is for us that there are so many qualified foreign ministry individuals within the country who they could have taken with them. So one of them missed out on an opportunity just because he wanted to take his son. And that's a clear case of nepotism. Because what qualifies him just because he's a student of Berkeley, what qualifies him to accompany his father? And how many world leaders did we see who had their children accompanying them in an official capacity? So it would have been, if he wanted to show his son what the UN was and what the UN building looked like and what the United Nations General Assembly looked like, he could have always requested a tour for his son. But instead, he exposed his son, and that gives his son undue advantage over thousands of Sri Lankans who don't have access to the facilities that he did.
But I put it to you that this whole ambience of impunity is very much evident from this very incident. We had a situation where former President Mahinda Rajapaksa attended Chogam meetings in the company of his son Namal, who was in any case but he was of course a member of parliament. But many felt that that was an abuse of the president's executive authority.
For us now, when you look at this, I'm saying look at this from a very rational outlook. I'm not saying that we need to jump into any conclusions, but when the chief government, the chief opposition whip, Mr. MP Lakshman Kiriyalla, was making a statement in Parliament just the other day, he got an immediate message from the Catholic Church that they requested Ali Sabri to be taken away from these investigations because there's a clear case of conflict of interest. Now, how does that conflict of interest happen? He represented the former President Gotabaya Rajapaksa in over 25 of his court cases, and the recent Channel 4 expose or the bombshell that Channel 4 dropped, it clearly says that the current government and the leaders, the former leaders of the previous government, which included President Gotabaya Rajapaksa, could have been directly involved. And they didn't mention it by name, but that's the essence of the whole thing. So what moral right, did he have to, take up the role of even foreign minister? I don't think he should be in parliament. I think that he should have resigned the moment that Gotabaya Rajapaksa resigned, but he didn't do that. And again, for us, this is, because I've been getting a lot of hate on social media for this from certain parties, this is nothing personal. I reiterate, this is nothing personal, but this is, like I said, the reputation of the country at stake. And when you say that President Rajapaksa took Namal Rajapaksa, there was a huge outcry. People were shocked that it happened. You know how shocked.
But nothing has changed, though. But nothing has changed.
Nothing has changed, but then...
a few days, I thought that after he made this mistake, he would apologize. He didn't. But then again, Minister Ali Sabri made another massive diplomatic blunder, something that I have never seen in Sri Lanka. He made a huge diplomatic blunder of getting involved in the affairs of India and Canada. Now, we all know that India and Canada are having issues, but is that our issue? No. We are a very small blip on that radar. Canada has cross-country support. India has cross-country support. India has helped us a lot. Canada has continuously helped us a lot during reconciliation periods. And he had to go and make a statement directly criticizing Justin Trudeau. He mentioned Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's name. He said that Minister Justin Trudeau was making unsubstantiated claims. And for what? Why do we have to get involved in a geopolitical war between two countries? It's absolutely unnecessary. And I remember the likes of Mangala Samaravira, who was foreign minister. I remember the likes of Lakshman Kadirgama, who was the foreign minister. And I'm sure you remember, for us, I was very young at that time, but Lakshman Kadirgama, in his very soft-spoken manner, managed to get a ban on the LTTE during his tenure. And he didn't he didn't portray fake patriotism and, used his trumped-up war card to get that ban. He dealt with it in the right channels. So the foreign minister has to be competent, because the foreign minister is also the direct representative of our country in foreign relations to that other country. And if he did have a problem with the way the Canadian Prime Minister made remarks, that's why there is an official Canadian mission in this country. And the standard practice is that he could have easily brought this to the attention of the President, and they could have summoned this envoy and expressed their dissatisfaction. But instead, he has now put his foot in his mouth again, because for me it seems that whenever he stands in front of a mic, he thinks that he's a lawyer. Yes, he is a lawyer. Yes, he is a President's Counsel. But he is also a cabinet rank Minister of Foreign Affairs.
On that note, let's go for a quick break and take a peek at the headlines this evening. We are in conversation with Mr. Rehan Jayawickreme from the SJB, and this is the deputy of the youth wing there. We'll see you on the other side of the break, shall we?
News First, Newsline with Faraz Shaukat Ali on TV1.
A movement.
News First, Newsline with Faraz Shaukat Ali on TV1.
And welcome back to Newsline. I'm in conversation with Mr. Rehan Jayawickreme from the SJB. Welcome back to Rehan. And you were talking about Foreign Minister Ali Sabri and his meddling with the affairs of two other countries, namely Canada and India. But do you think that this is a byproduct of this sort of ambience of impunity that they've enjoyed all their time and their closeness to the former president and so on?
Absolutely. When you see the whole Aragale, what was their main request? What was their motive? What they said was go home. What they meant by saying go home was not for the entire Pohottua to come back into power and for many of their members to be cabinet ministers. Now we all know that Minister Sabri was instrumental in getting Gotabaya Rajapaksa into power. In fact, I don't know if you remember this, but he made a very public statement that Singapore had Lee Kuan Yew and that Malaysia had Mr. Mahathir Mohamad, and that Sri Lanka is definitely, that Gotabaya Rajapaksa is definitely the next Lee Kuan Yew of this country. So he, at whatever point, he made a very bad judgment call and was a contributing factor. Not just him, but many others in the Pohottua were responsible for hoodwinking people, 6.9 million people to be exact, to get Gotabaya Rajapaksa, President Gotabaya Rajapaksa into power. So that being said, you know, the minute that President Gotabaya Rajapaksa resigned, Minister Ali Sabri goes ahead and accepts the post of Foreign Minister. Now I understand if most of them, I understand that most of them are members of parliament and they can't just resign from their seats. But he could have, and he didn't. And that for me is not the character that minister particularly portrays himself out to be. And again, I'm saying that this is nothing personal, but this is the composition of the individuals that enjoyed unlimited impunity during Gotabaya Rajapaksa's time and who are now receiving the same amount of, or enjoying the same amount of impunity under President Wickremesinghe's regime. And again, I say this all boils down to a mandate. And the fact that Sri Lanka has now cancelled the local government elections. They have now called for the cancellation of nominations. You know, where else do we see this happening in the world? I was on a show about maybe a month ago, and I said, name me one democratic country where elections are postponed. Countries like Venezuela, countries like Russia, countries like Pakistan, who had multiple problems financially. And, many countries that have had problems financially have never ever cancelled the election. And this again to me is a complete travesty of the people's franchise, the people's right to vote, the people's sovereignty. All these things are gravely affected by the decisions, the poor decision making of this particular government.
How do you see this pan out when we do have elections? The next presidential election is about 15 months away. By next August, I suppose they need to be starting making the announcements and so on. How do you think it'll play out? All these frustrations that the people are having in terms of poor governance, in terms of this sort of seemingly endless impunity and state patronage of various people allied to and aligned to the Pohottua. How do you see it all playing out?
I have a serious doubt that even though the presidential elections are supposed to be held at a certain time, I have a very serious doubt that the presidential election will be even held. That again is a fear that we all have. It's because if they cancel the lower level election like the local government election in the fear of losing, and the approval ratings that have been done statistically doesn't show that this government has a very high approval rating. So the more their approval ratings drop, the more the danger of them cancelling or even postponing the presidential election. We may say that that there is no possibility of doing so, but we also thought that about the local government election. And what makes us think that the president, to save his skin, will not call for a referendum the same way that his uncle called for a referendum in 1982 or 1983? What makes us think he won't? What makes us think that he won't play from the same playbook? Because, like I said, for us, if he could have cancelled one election, that boils down like a domino effect, and he could cancel or postpone the future elections as well, which is going to be detrimental again to the sovereignty and the franchise of the people's right.
As a member of the youth of Sri Lanka, you with all your youthfulness, how frustrated are you and people in your age group that this system was what the people wanted changed, and that it hasn't been changed, and that you have a caretaker president who's acting in anything other than a caretaker capacity, making statements like that will be all right for in 2048 and so on and so forth, and really not taking any action in terms of various matters before the courts, and some of them not even come to court. How do you see this frustration playing out with the youth of the country, people your sort of age group?
First of all, I have to make a little bit of a correction there, even though you said, I'm flattered that you spoke about youthfulness, but this is going to be my last year as vice chairman of the youth group, because I firmly believe that even the UN has not classified my age, which is 37, as being part of the youth. So this is actually going to be my last year. I have already notified that I wish to resign by the end of this year from my post as the youth vice chairman. But that's just a correction that I would like to make, and also something that I would like to tell the public. Otherwise, they'll think that I'm like any other ordinary and regular politician that hangs on to these things until the age of 50. But getting back into your question, the youth of this country are severely disgruntled because they have been oppressed from time to time, for time and time again. They have also this whole data protection bill, or the online safety bill, is also going to impede and impose on the free thinking and the free will of the youth. And this is where the danger lies. The danger lies that during the next election cycle, there is already an estimated 1.2 to 1.3 million new voters that are going to enter the fray, people or youth over the age of 18. And you saw in the Aragale, you saw that the youth that were at the Aragale were highly animated. They were fighting for their rights. And my fear is that if this government continues oppressing the voices of the youth, that the next Aragale is going to be something that none of us can control, and every single politician in this country, opposition or otherwise, is going to be in the firing range or the range of the disgruntled youth, and this is going to be a severe problem that we may not be able to contain, which is why the president should take corrective measures, withdraw these two bills, even the anti-terrorism bill, withdraw all these bills that are not for the freedom of the country, and to create a meaningful dialogue with the youth of the country, which I don't see happening at all.
Do you think that notwithstanding any move to sort of postpone the presidential elections, but even that, isn't that a bit far-fetched? Don't you need 2/3 of majority and a mandate referendum of the people?
What that particular point entails is the postponement or the cancelling of the elections. I don't know about that law in its entirety, but I don't think that he needs a 2/3 majority. I may be wrong, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think he needs a 2/3 to go into a referendum. And I may be wrong, but even if he does need that 2/3, because there are two sides to this. He may first have a referendum to extend the term of the presidency, or like what his uncle did, like President Rehan Jayawickreme did, he could strike a deal with the majority parliamentarians in the Pohottuwa and say that he wants to extend the lifespan of parliament, which is what President Jayawickreme exactly did. And how many MPs do we know in the Pohottuwa who are hoping that they'll have an easy win? If they offered another 5 years to do nothing in parliament, I'm sure they'll go ahead and accept it, and that could also be the president's way of strengthening the SLPP to go into a future alliance with them.
Well, I suppose we'll have to wait and see. But what kind of, I know you're not an astrologer, and you can't really see into the future, but you can make a considered guesstimate. What do you think? If it comes to an election, how very well do you think the leader of the SJB, of your party, will do at, let's say, a presidential poll?
Right now, we are pretty confident that he can be Sri Lanka's next president. Like I said, my opinion may be biased because I belong to that party and because I believe in Mr. Sajith Premadasa. So it could be very well that he could be the next president. But even us, even the SJB, we need to be more forceful. We need to be more forceful on the streets. We need to campaign very hardly against the anti-terrorism bill. We need to campaign very hardly against the online data protection bill. So all these things are aspects that the SJB need to focus much more on. And I hope that as a party, we can take a collective decision and even come into the streets if these bills are going to be enacted.
A nice Sri Lankan saying, we'll see indeed. Rehan Jayawickreme, thank you very much for being on Newsline. We much appreciate your presence. And that's the way it was on Newsline this evening. And here's me wishing you all the very best. Take care as much as you can. And God bless you all.